Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Well, it finally arrived. You've been talking to me about it for some weeks. The Sibelius Symphony Cycle featuring Jukka-Pekka Saraste on Ondine. Ondine being the major Finnish label. They're statutorily required to do the Sibelius Symphonies every few years, or so it seems. Now, Saraste, oh my, doesn't he look older? I mean, he did an earlier Sibelius cycle for RCA containing symphonies and all the major orchestral music and tone poems and things. It was a very good box. It was with, I believe, Finnish Radio Symphony. And it had some wonderful performances in it. It was decently recorded for its day. This sounds quite a bit better. And I think that, it's held up well. I've enjoyed it. And he recorded a whole bunch of other Sibelius symphonies for various other labels in the interim. So he's been all over this music. That earlier cycle was done with great naturalness and ease. It might have lacked a little something in terms of personality. There were some details that I think were over-literally observed, which have been corrected in this box. I'm thinking particularly of the end of the first movement of the Fifth Symphony, where the trumpets were like really backwards. And I looked at the score, and they're only marked mezzo forte to start, and then they crescendo. But they need to be louder at the beginning. They just need to be. You have to hear da da dum bum bum ba da 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 da, and then it can get louder as it goes. But you got to hear them better. Anyway, that's not really the point. The point is it was a good Sibelius cycle. And all the other stuff, the incidental music, was wonderful. And there was some stuff at the time that was kind of hard to get. Now, RCA treated that box with absolute disdain, especially because they made a whole new cycle of similar stuff with Colin Davis and the London Symphony, which was absolutely vile. It was a blot on the career of everybody concerned, especially Colin Davis, who was a serious Sibelian. It was just horrible. He was off the whole time. Finally, they boxed up his first Sibelius cycle. RCA did and sold it cheap, and that was that. I don't think it's available anymore. And so it's very good that this came out, because he is a very natural Sibelius conductor, a born Sibelian. He reminds me a little bit of Paavo Berglund in the sense that his performances tend not to be demonstrative in an obvious way, but they are natural and flowing and organic and cohesive. And I will say this, he is one of the few conductors today who can do the first two symphonies as successfully and comfortably as the next four. Because what we usually get, especially these days, is that young conductors who are not necessarily predisposed to indulge the romantic era, which is what the first two symphonies are. I mean, they're Tchaikovsky, that kind of thing. The heart-on-sleeve, emotional, big romantic, patriotic, And the last ones are organic, cohesive, neoclassical in concept, not in formal anything. They're original to Sibelius, formally. But the emotional temperature is quite different, and the way that they're handled and the relationship between form and expressive content is quite different. And so today's younger conductors tend to do the last batch well, and the first two dreadfully, really, really dreadfully. Or if they're very good at the first two, they don't get the last of them. For most of our lives, Sibelius's Life on Disc, the first two were much more successful than the last batch. But now it's the other way around, which is very interesting. And Ondine, of course, has an absolutely spectacular Sibelius cycle, which I have sitting right over here. Oh, look. There it is, which recently came out in a bigger box, featuring the Helsinki Philharmonic, as we have here also, with Leif Segerstam. And the performances are quite different. It's very interesting to compare them. This is not the same old, because Segerstam was a conductor of that sort of romantic mean, and he was far more crazy and interventionist than Saraste is. But this is still very fine Sibelius. He scarcely puts a foot wrong. The first symphony is tremendously cohesive. The finale is not a letdown. The orchestra plays beautifully. The second symphony has a terrific first movement and a really good finale. It doesn't bog down in senseless repetition. Really, really beautiful. The third symphony is glorious, particularly the very ending, which is always problematic. But Saraste gets a certain balance between the woodwinds and everybody else that somehow it makes the whole thing work better. Not quite sure why, but it does. The fourth is grim, but it doesn't drag. The fifth goes the way it's supposed to go, with some really lovely playing in the first two movements particularly. The finale is... I like the way Segerstam handles the strings in the finale. Saraste is not as obsessed with the nature of tremolos, which really matter in Sibelius. And you hear with Segerstam, more point and detail and all that, buzzing and whirring before that swan theme comes in. But it's really beautifully done. The sixth is the only performance in which I have some questions. And again, it's the same issue I had with Berglund, which is that the finale particularly is marked allegro molto, and nobody plays it that way. I think the only person who really had the guts to play the entire finale the way Sibelius indicated in the score with his tempo markings was Leonard Bernstein. And he did it to a certain extent at the expense of precision of string playing, because the music is terribly difficult for the strings. It really, really is. I mean, it's a major, major effort. I mean, it takes 10 minutes, this finale. In this performance, it should take something like 8, 7, something substantially less. I mean, it's marked allegro molto. It's the fastest tempo in the entire symphony. And it's got to go that way. So the result is that, especially at that culmination at the end where the strings are going dum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum da, where the strings underneath are going check 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 ya da 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 dum ba da 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 dum. I mean, he's taking that very deliberately. It should be yum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 da. It can go a bit slower. But it's clear what Sibelius is asking for, and he doesn't get it here. It's almost like, there's a tradition in Czechoslovakia or Czechia, or whatever it's called these days, to play the finale of Dvorak's Eighth at a much more deliberate tempo, especially the scherzo part, bum, bum, ba, bum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum. And the Czech performers tend to take that at a very deliberate speed. Fortunately, other people do it better, the way Dvorak wanted them to. And this is the same thing. I don't know whether it's a local tradition or not, but or something about the score I don't know. But allegro molto means to go faster than most people play that music, and this is a particularly extreme example of deliberation in that finale. Some might just think it has personality. The seventh is glorious, absolutely fabulous, beautifully put together, and all proceeds in one gigantic arch. It's absolutely fabulous. So this is a really good Sibelius cycle with that one caveat. Just so we know that they're all human and stuff happens sometimes. But I recommend it, and I think you should hear it, and I believe you'll enjoy it if you are a Sibelius person. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.